Dear friends, dear colleagues, it's my honor that I can greet you today here at this very specific moment that we are actually, this is not the moment which we actually meant it will be when we called for this conference. So in a way, it's even more urgent to discuss these topics today. And we had yesterday briefly discussed whether we should tackle this. I think yes. I mean, this is a space where actually we should consider and we should reflect everything what is happening around us in the same way as we meant to reflect everything what is happening in Europe for the moment. So thank you very much for joining us today on this occasion. I have a few words which I prepared, which I think it's important for me to tell you. So I will just try to pronunciate them well. So today, as we commence the Balkan talks on war and peace within debates on Euro program, I'm compelled to reflect on the memory of Miladin Životić, one of the 8 founders of the Institute to whom we have dedicated our annual prize for critical engagement. From the very onset of the wars in the 90s, he emerged as one of the most outspoken critics of nationalism and war politics. He became an emblematic figure in the anti-war movement and assumed the position of president of Civic Action for Peace. He was also instrumental in founding and presiding over the Belgrade Circle, a gathering of independent intellectuals who were all critical of the Milosevic regime back then. While adamantly critiquing the methods and goals of Belgrade's war politics, he provided both moral but also political support to war victims. Miladin Životić believed that the prospects of post-Yugoslav cooperation depend on how Sarajevo was treated during the siege. And he visited this besieged city twice, in 94 and 95. He held a firm belief that the coexistence of people in this region would prosper even further if those who sought to shape it according to their utopian visions, or chimeras, as he actually said, relinquished political power. According to him, when they are silenced, the natural forms of harmonious interrelations among peoples in these areas, in this territory, inherent in the life itself, would develop organically. It is symbolic that we convey today at the Center for Cultural Decontamination a shelter for all anti-war activists 3 decades ago to discuss the pressing issues of war and peace today. Regrettably, it appears that we haven't learned anything from the history, as war is again on the European soil and warmongering is again all over the Balkans. Nonetheless, we from the Institute take pride in the existence of one more place in Belgrade, in the intellectual community, both within and around our institute, that champions the values of openness, inclusion, and deliberation. Those are very foundation of peaceful democratic society we all aspire to create. Consequently, it is for us the utmost importance to host these Balkan talks on war and peace here in Center, in collaboration with our partners as Fischer Stiftung, and its program Debates on Europe, to whom we are deeply grateful for this chance. In closing, I wish to reiterate some words of another founder and anti-war activist, Nebojša Popov, whose sentiments from 1990 resonate with us today. Let us dare to shape our own lives, refusing to relinquish our destiny into anyone's uncontrolled hands. If we don't even attempt to become full-fledged citizens, how we can know what our realistic prospects are for freedom and democracy, for peace, not war, fair, not rigged elections, civilized life, not brutality, tolerance, not warrior competition, for the entrepreneurship and success, and not inertia and apathy. We indeed do have choices. Thank you.
So, dear guests of Balkan Talks on War and Peace, allow me to welcome you to Belgrade. Of recent, Belgrade figures boldly in the international arena, and one is tempted to say again. For many, especially in our neighboring countries, the name of Belgrade has referred to the topos that signified wars. Today, it appears in two folds, as one of two agents of a complex, protracted, always postponed normalization, where normalization stands for an attempt at peace, at peaceful reconciliation, which would banish wars from this part of the world, hopefully forever. Second, Belgrade also appears as an actor, if a minor one, in the international political knot, which at this very moment and for more than a year and a half damages life of millions of Ukrainians. Its political position has also been justified by the reasons of war. It seems, therefore, that no better place can be chosen for these talks or debates on peace and war than this one. However, allow me to also remind us of other references which come to mind when we say Belgrade. Belgrade, as the capital of Yugoslavia, said no to Stalin in 1948. In 1961, Belgrade saw the establishment of the non-aligned movement, becoming an important actor in the promotion of decolonization, disarmament, opposition to racism, and apartheid. Belgrade was an open city, hosting the first feminist conference in Eastern Europe already in 1978. It lived with its dissidents, some of whom made what is now the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory, instilling the spirit of rebellion into their successors. When bloodshed began at the beginning of the 1990s, one that shattered lives, communities, and ties, there were staunch supporters of peace, supporters of life, who stood relentlessly in the streets of Belgrade, rain or shine. Women in Black remain the brightest legacy of Belgrade, despite the reign in politics that far too often works to erase this living archive of a possibility of a peaceful cohabitation. This very place, I'm not happy with this mic. Something's happening with me and the mic. So this very place in which we have gathered today, Center for Cultural Decontamination, with its long-standing late director who was visible at one of the two photos, Borka Pavicevic, did volumes to keep the alternatives to war alive, to decontaminate our space and give us breath when it was literally hard to breathe and when it was most important to still breathe together. Ultimately, Belgrade is today a city in which a large community of Russians found refuge from the regime that fosters death. Knowing well what it means to live in internal immigration when your own city is your prison cell and not by your own choosing, many of us greeted those in need of refuge with open arms, hopefully with the same zeal with which others greet our fellow Belgraders who decide to leave and find more sense, more peace and life elsewhere. As Gazela already said, this event began to be conceptualized at the time when Russia attacked Ukraine. At that time, we witnessed a resurrection of many old war ghosts, some of which are haunting our presence for 3 full decades. When I say we, I believe I speak on behalf of many of us from this region of what used to be Yugoslavia. Much water has flown through Sava and Danube since, as we say here. The situation on the relation between Belgrade and Pristina has significantly worsened, and especially so in the last days. The war raging on the Ukrainian soil is without an end in sight. The question, how do we, or how can we think about war and peace, especially we in the Balkans, has never been more pertinent. I wish to thank all those who made this event possible. Antje Kontius and Eileen Rigier from S. Fisher Foundation, Karl-Henrik Fredriksson from Debates in Europe, without whose patience and goodwill, none of this would have been possible. Our inimitable director, Gazela Puter-Draško, for her heartfelt support, as well as my colleagues, Marija Mandic, Srđan Đurović, who's unfortunately not with us today, fell ill, Aleksandar Pavlović, Milivoj Bešlin, Dragana Rakić, Milan Radić, and Irena Žuvela, who were diligent, imaginative, and practical, 3 most important traits leading to peaceful coexistence. I will now ask Karl-Henrik to come, say something, address us in the name of Debates of Europe, and then slowly but surely begin the debates.
Thank you, Adriana. Debates on Europe exist for a little bit more than 10 years already, and we go places where something is at stake. We've been in Kharkiv in 2015, 2016. We were in Minsk around the same time. A little bit later, about a year later, we were in St. Petersburg. In St. Petersburg, we discussed how to deal with the past. Some of the protagonists there came from Germany, describing the Vergangenheitsbewältigung that has been part of the German, not only Wirtschaftswunder, but moral miracle since 1945, trying to describe the differences between guilt and responsibility, about collective and individual responsibility, which met in St. Petersburg with a very different concept of looking at the past. And we're, I think, experience the consequences of that lack of, or that different concept of dealing with the past. When we got the first impetus to what we will listen to and hear and take part in the next couple of days, as both my the former speakers have noted, the situation was a different one. The focus was solely on Russia's aggressive invasion of Ukraine. Today, the events of the last week makes it clear that we're again at a place where something is at stake. And with that background, with that backdrop, the discussions that we will have in these 2 days will become, I think, even more important. I will not thank anyone now. I will leave that till the last event tomorrow, when we see how things have developed. But I will instead invite the two present panelists, Gentiana Kera and Ivan Vejvoda, to come up with me at the stage, and we will start the first panel discussion.